Are you the friend who's always being asked for health advice? Now imagine turning that passion into a fulfilling career with our Become a Nutrition Coach program. Step into a world where your enthusiasm for wellness becomes the heart of your own thriving business. With me as your professor and guide and coach on our user-friendly digital platform, you can learn from anywhere at your very own pace. It's perfect for your busy life. Envision empowering others to live their healthiest lives, all while growing a career you love. You're not just gaining a certification here, you're joining a community of like-minded professionals ready to support and celebrate with you every step of the way. So what are you waiting for? It's time to nourish your future and help change lives, including your own. Head over to nutritiouslife.com/BNC for a free class and a sneak peek of the program. Your journey to becoming a nutrition coach begins now. Ever walk into a room and forget why you walked in? Or look for your glasses only to realize that they are on your head? We've all been there. But how do you know if this is just normal aging or being frazzled or signs of something bigger going on? If this has happened to you, you are not going to want to miss this week's episode of the Living a Nutritious Life podcast. I'm your host, Keri Glassman, and I'm super excited to share this incredibly important episode with you. June is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month, and there's no better person to bring on the podcast than my friend, Dr. Naidoo. Uma and I have had lots and lots and lots of talks about brain health and the connections to our gut health, our lifestyle, and the food we eat. We even have a course together, which you can, by the way, find on nutritiouslife.com. Anyway, in this episode, I wanted to really dive into Alzheimer's disease specifically. We talk about her bogos for brain health, her must-eat foods for brain health. We also talk about what exactly is happening to our brains when we don't sleep well and when we don't manage our stress. And she gives us some useful resources to assess our own brain health. So, you do not want to miss this one. I want your brains to stay sharp as you age. So take a listen. Let's learn together today. And as always, please rate, review, and share. Welcome to Living a Nutritious Life. I'm Keri Glassman, a celebrity registered dietitian nutritionist. Join me every Tuesday on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms as I bring in some heavy hitters to share the latest in nutrition and wellness science. We dive deep into food, sleep, stress, relationships, and so much more. Your weekly guide to a happier, healthier, more nutritious life. So tune in to make nutrition and wellness a little less complicated and a lot more doable and fun. Welcome. I'm so happy to see you again, Uma. It's been too long and always so amazing to see you.
Same here, Keri. I couldn't wait to chat with you, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Always love our conversations. So much to learn and so much that I want to share, and I would love you to share with our listeners today. It is June. It is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and I really just want to dive in. I mean, there's so much we could talk about as far as brain health goes, and I really, though, want to dive in and have a really informative conversation about Alzheimer's, because I think that it is one of those things that I think scares a lot of people. I also think it's one of those things that people are always confused about. What can I do to prevent it? Yeah. And I think that people just need to know, right? They need to be informed, and people also need to know how to help not only themselves, but the people in their lives that they love. Yeah. So let's educate, let's chat, let's have this discussion. So again, June is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month, and it is the perfect time to have this conversation. So let's start off with, first of all, I mean, you and I did a course together, and we talk about this a lot in the course. And one thing we talk about, and I know we have a whole lesson on dementia and how dementia is that umbrella term that
Hmm.
encompasses a variety
Yes.
of diseases and conditions
Hmm.
related to impaired memory and cognitive decline. And Alzheimer's disease is the most prevalent of these
Hmm.
diseases. I believe it makes
Hmm.
up 60 to 80% of dementia cases. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So it's definitely something that I'm so excited to talk to you because you and I, Keri, speak the same language around interventions for these types of conditions. And I think the biggest factor and the biggest take home point that I want to share with people is that lifestyle and nutrition, or nutrition as a pillar of lifestyle, is so critical in terms of how we're thinking about our brain health, because we are understanding much more about, we don't have a cause, we are understanding a lot more about dementia and Alzheimer's dementia. I want to mention to people that I work with an international Alzheimer's prevention expert group, and we are associated with a charity in the UK called Food for the Brain.
Mm,
And they have a cognitive test that you can do for free.
mm,
And you can sign up at foodforthebrain.org. And basically, it's a questionnaire that you can complete and start to build resources and get assessments. Now, because I'm a physician, I'm not going to say any of this is diagnostic, but it guides you to not only share information, but get lifestyle interventions. My colleague, Professor Rudy Tanzi at Harvard, designed a really easy acronym years ago called SHIELD, SHIELD, really where
mhm,
he talks about lifestyle interventions and the
mhm,
first things that you can pay attention to in terms of making changes, things like sleep, handling stress, interacting with friends, exercise daily, learn new things, and eat a healthy diet.
mhm.
So he put this together as a quick way for people to sort of remember the things you have at your fingertips that can be
Right.
helping you every day and all the time.
Okay. And where can people access that information about Shield?
If about Shield, they can Google Dr. Rudy Tanzi, Rudi. His last name is Tanzi, Tanzi. He has written
Okay.
about it in many publications, and the
Great.
acronym is SHIELD. And it's just
Okay.
something to keep at your fingertips that you can access.
Okay. So I think one thing that comes up often, and I have this conversation even with friends, again, being in this perimenopause, menopause stage of life, we have this conversation all the time. And sometimes people talk about this even in a joking manner. They say,
Yeah.
how do you know the difference between normal memory loss that comes along with aging and early signs of Alzheimer's?
This is best assessed by a physician with things like neuropsychological testing, a proper full mini mental status exam. But that aside, if you're noticing more than the typical, I forgot where I placed my keys, I don't know where I left my glasses, that happens to a lot of us just in normal life. But if you're
Mhm,
noticing a persistent pattern of these types of things earlier on, maybe a certain level of forgetfulness that your family is noticing.
mhm,
Things that older individuals with early signs of Alzheimer's might be doing is forgetting to shut off things like the stove,
mhm,
forgetting to um, do the normal things that they would in the course of just regular life. And families will start to notice that. They place the kettle on the stove or they switch the kettle on with no water,
mhm.
and then it shorts or something not so great happens. I think that it's important to not stress individuals in our lives, whether they are peers or our elders, but be observant of things like that. And
Right.
I think that if you are concerned, the best way to address this is to have them see a primary care doctor and then get a referral to a neurologist or a neuropsychiatrist just to
Mhm.
get an assessment. And some of these things can be done online, by the way. And some of these questionnaires and resources can be accessed by the individual or family members online.
Right. And I think it's good to just have that baseline. Like if you're
That's
worried,
right.
if you feel like you're a little more forgetful than you're comfortable with, okay, let me just get a good baseline here, see where I'm at. and just at least know, is this, at least to make yourself even feel better, like you said, so you're not
Right.
stressed about it. This is a normal part of aging. I mean, because I think there's multiple things going on. There's normal aging, right? And
Yes.
there's some memory loss, some that happens. And then
Right.
there's, although there are also many things we can do to keep our cognition in check, but there is
Correct.
still a normal amount of memory loss that can happen. Then there's also, this is a stage of life, I think, for many people in the 40s, 50s, 60s, where they're sandwiched between elderly parents, kids, career. There's a lot going on. And I think when there's a
Right.
lot of things going on in your mind and you're very, very busy, you sometimes do forget more things because there's just a
It's
lot going on in your brain, and that's normal as well. And then there's
it
also that
is.
for women, there's that perimenopause, menopause stage where our brains are also changing. And there's also
That's
that.
right.
So sometimes it's like, okay, am I just overloaded and there's too many tabs open in
Right.
my brain? Is this early,
Yes.
is this early signs of Alzheimer's, or is this just perimenopause, menopause happening? Like, what's going on? So I think I like that you mentioned that, to go and get checked, but also there's even some tests that you can do online, because I think sometimes people just want that. They want to just know, okay, this is just normal. Take a breath. Let me
That's
implement
right.
these lifestyle changes that I can make to make
Hmm.
sure that I don't end up with dementia, Alzheimer's specifically later on in life.
I love what you said there, Keri, because I think that expression of, we all work with laptops these days. It's like having too many tabs open.
Right.
You are taking care of older aging parents. Taking care of your children and your younger family members, but you are really pulled in both directions, and in fact, not just two directions, in many, because you have your career, you have maybe
Right.
your own. Maybe not just maybe you're pretty healthy, but you might be going through perimenopause, and it can be so distressing to feel like you're forgetting things or you can't keep it under control. But the one thing I want to stress in our conversation as well is lifestyle, things like sleep and stress management, but
Hmm.
also how we're eating is a very big driver of neuroinflammation. And any time that we can combat neuroinflammation through how we eat and our lifestyle, including things like proper sleep, we are fending off that neuroinflammation. And one of the biggest drivers of inflammation and neuroinflammation in the US certainly is ultra processed foods. So just by simply cleaning up a little bit of what we're doing, we can start to combat neuroinflammation over time in our brain.
Okay, so because that was a question I wanted to ask you, the absolute best ways to prevent Alzheimer's, the best ways. And I know, like you already just mentioned, lifestyle habits like managing your stress, getting proper
Hmm.
sleep, and eating a healthy diet. So let's talk a little bit more about that. It's all about, though, preventing that neuroinflammation, right? So
That's
that's
yes.
the goal, to prevent Alzheimer's, is anything we can do to prevent that neuroinflammation. And
Right.
so again, you mentioned sleep, stress, the foods we eat. So let's just start specifically with foods. And I know we've talked, and again, we talk about this in
Yeah.
our course. In our course together, we talk about
Yes.
we talk about
All
lots
of this.
of foods, and we are on the exact same page with these foods. But while I have you here, we want to hear it straight from you. Let's
Thank
talk
you.
about some of those foods. Your absolute favorite foods to help prevent Alzheimer's and keep our brains
So
healthy.
Keri, the only way I got through medical school was learning acronyms, right? Because it's the only way to learn the multiple lists across all
Right.
the years that you
I love an
studied.
acronym. I'm with
Um,
you.
exactly. So I have BOGOS for brain health, BOGOS. And these just list foods that you are aware of that are healthy, but it puts it again in one little list that you keep with you. And you think, hey, if I'm ordering at a restaurant, if I'm at the supermarket or the farmer's market, these are things I want to keep in my repertoire, my
Mhm.
sort of foods that I go to.
Yep.
The first is B is for berries. Any colors of berries bring you these different antioxidants and vitamins. Frozen berries are an option. For example, strawberries are often, very high on the sort of the
Yeah.
EWG's list. So you can buy them
Wild
frozen and
blueberries.
organic and
Yeah, I was
wild
gonna say
and wild
wild blueberries,
blueberries.
which you won't even find them fresh, but you can get wild frozen berries, which I think have 10 times the amount of antioxidants as
They
regular
have, yes, they
blueberries.
have more antioxidant in them, and often you'll see them frozen wild blueberries. Exactly.
Right.
O is for olive oil. Now we know that's a healthy fat for our brain,
Mhm.
so use it in your foods and keep it as your go-to. G is for greens. We know our greens not only contain folate, which fends off things like depression over time, They're low
Mhm.
calorie, highly nutrient dense, and good fiber. So there's so many things that they hit that are fending off inflammation right there.
Right. The
Oh,
antioxidants. And then also, I'm glad you brought that up though with the fiber,
right.
because fiber is good to feed our gut microbiome. And we know that our gut microbiome is incredibly important to our brain health as well. There's that gut brain connection.
Exactly. So all of the bogos actually have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Not all of them have fiber. Like olive oil wouldn't have fiber, but if you get your healthy fats, that category from say avocado, that's high in fiber.
Mhm.
Then the always for the omegas, remembering that some
Mhm.
people eat seafood like wild caught salmon, but others eat nuts and seeds and don't consume seafood. So that's always an option for people. So making sure you have them as part of your life, as part of your diet is important. And S is for spices. Some of the spices that have hit the high notes with conditions like Alzheimer's, dementia, memory, and cognition are turmeric with a pinch of black pepper. We know and have heard before that the black pepper, piperine,
Yeah.
activates the curcumin and makes it more bioavailable. Cinnamon, saffron, rosemary, and ginger not only just flavor your food, but they have a lot of rich antioxidant properties that help memory and cognition. So just there, you have your list on your phone, wherever you are, try to incorporate these foods on a regular basis, because then you at a baseline,
Right.
always doing things actively to help your brain.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the acronym part of it. And I'm glad you brought, I love the S part for spices. Something that I always have told clients for years and years is herbs and spices at every single meal.
Yes.
It can be dried,
Yes.
fresh, but herbs and spices every
Mhm.
single meal, including something as simple as eggs for breakfast. Put a little
That's
dried
right.
or a little dried basil, because herbs and spices add flavor. So they make your meals feel more satisfying, but they also have antibacterial, antimicrobial benefits, but they also
Yeah.
have antioxidant benefits, and those antioxidant benefits are anti-inflammatory. So there's anti-inflammatory benefits just by adding a little herbs and spices. It's something that you can get in the habit of doing. Again, it's just an easy thing to get into the rhythm of, to get into the habit of. You don't have to have them
Yeah.
fresh. You can keep them dried in your house, and you're doing something proactive to improve the nutrient density of every single meal that you're having. So I love that you have spices as part of that acronym. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, though, the sleep and stress that you also mentioned. Obviously, those are two pillars of a nutritious life. I always talk about sleep
Right.
deep and stress less,
Yes.
but how do they actually link to helping us prevent Alzheimer's?
So one of the things we get related to sleep is that when our body has not rested, our cells, especially including our brain cells, we talk about this process of kind of repair that the brain does as
Mhm.
we go to sleep and rest. And it doesn't have a chance to do that. So conditions, if say we have developing or have developed neuroinflammation, it's going to start to get worse, for example, because we are not sleeping well, we're not resting our body, we're not resting our brain.
Mhm.
The other thing that happens with sleep is our attention changes, our ability to focus changes. So if someone is chronically sleep deprived, and this also happens in perimenopausal
Mhm.
women as well, the sleep can be impacted by some hormonal shifts, then you can actually feel more stressed. You can
Mhm.
feel more depressed and anxious just because you've slept poorly. And I see this in my clinic all the time where when we identify that someone has a problem with insomnia, they may actually be reflecting symptoms of even struggling with memory. But when you correct the sleep, it's not necessarily that they have a primary problem with memory. And I'm not saying sleep cures dementia. Just want to be very clear about that. But if you are in this phase where you're struggling a little bit, think about
Right.
how you're sleeping. Think about going to bed earlier, eating an earlier meal. Think about what you're eating. Melatonin and tryptophan rich foods. I always say switch your breakfast for dinner. Eggs with some spinach, some
Mhm.
asparagus for dinner as an omelet. Eat earlier in the evening. Don't do your supermarketing and shopping at night because you're exposed to bright lights and that is impacting your circadian rhythm. When
Mhm.
you get up in the morning, make sure you are looking at light. The light is entering your eyes. It helps you the regulation of your circadian rhythm, which is your internal body clock. Simple things that don't require a prescription that we can be
Right.
doing.
So I understand that trying to sleep according, to your natural circadian rhythm and rising with the sun, going to
Yeah.
bed
Mhm.
as close to I mean, we're not going to bed right when the sun goes down, but as close to that as possible, definitely before midnight. I know the quality of sleep before midnight is better than the quality of sleep after midnight. So getting at least some pre-midnight sleep, I know, can be really important. But what did you mentioned though, the breakfast for dinner? Is that just in terms of
Yep.
you're saying having a lighter breakfast, or were you talking about what were you
So,
specifically
so
mentioning
I'm
that for?
so okay. I was saying flip your breakfast for dinner, and why? Because there are some melatonin and tryptophan-rich foods that naturally will encourage your body to be more restful, and eggs is one of them.
Okay, so you're
So,
just saying
if you're
yeah,
struggling with sleep, another food that is associated with helping people naturally get to sleep is tart cherry juice,
yeah,
and it's now available, but just watch out for added sugars in that. And it's just a
right,
little sip that some of my patients will take. They get it at natural food stores, and they
yeah,
find that it actually does help ease them to sleep. So just these little tips to sometimes we're
got it.
struggling. We talked about that sandwich generation and your sleep may be disrupted. These are just ways to help course correct that.
Absolutely. And I like that these are natural, simple ways. And the more consistent you are, the more, obviously, the more benefits you're going to get. And sometimes I think
Yes.
people try something one time and say, oh, that didn't really help. It's like, well, you have to actually be
You have to
consistent
do it for a
with
while.
it, and you
Right.
have to continue to do it, and you will start to feel some of the benefits, hopefully. But it's with the tart cherry juice. I love that one. Again, and people aren't eating necessarily fresh tart cherries, but that tart cherry juice you can find, like you mentioned, in health food stores, and you just want to
Mhm.
make sure you get that 100% tart cherry juice. And you can even just add a little bit. What I have people do is make chamomile tea, which we know chamomile tea can be
Yes.
beneficial for sleep.
It's a great
It
idea.
actually builds up in your system. So what I have people do is make chamomile tea and then add even an ounce or two of the tart cherry juice to the
Right.
tea to make it this like cherry chamomile tea. And the bet you have sort of that double whammy of the chamomile and the tart cherry, I think can be really beneficial. So I'm glad you brought up the tart cherry.
I love that you brought up teas because another tea that I talk about in my new book called Calm Your Mind with Food is lavender tea. Not something people usually go to because we usually associate lavender with a nice spa experience on
Right.
oil, but it actually can be made into a tea and it is
Mm,
extremely calming to the system. And along with that, I developed a non-edible Play-Doh that you can make with kids or adults. You can even make it gluten-free, but you add in the essence of something like lavender oil or lemon balm,
mm,
depending on what your mood or feeling is, just to sort of play and de-stress. Because the next thing you mentioned was, how do we manage our stress?
mhm.
Stress precipitates habit circuits in the brain. So when people talk about stress eating, it's a very real thing. They get into a bad habit.
Mhm.
Maybe they've gone back to work on site full time, and now they're ordering out from fast food restaurants every day
Right.
because they're forgetting their lunch. Well, their brain gets used to the processed, ultra processed fast foods and they start craving it more. And the brain gets into this almost stress circuit that it's very difficult to interrupt.
Mhm.
So, things that help us de stress, having that tea at work, making that Play Doh with your family, with your kids, or making it on your own are just ways to naturally help our stress
Shift the
levels.
behaviors and shift,
Meditation as well.
right, and shift your behavior. I love the
Yeah.
Play-Doh thing with the lavender, essential lavender oils in that, because I'm
Yeah.
thinking about people that sit on the couch after dinner, especially, and they're watching TV,
Yes.
and then they start to pick, or they crave something sweet, or they
Right.
want to pick even something salty and crunchy
Right.
they want to have, but having something to do with their hands, and then also
Right.
reaping the benefits of the essential oils of the
The
lavender,
essential oil.
which is calming.
It's
That's
so true.
amazing to sort of just be playing around with the Play-Doh. And then I love that. I'm going to make some lavender Play-Doh. I love that. That's great. Okay, so we talked about sleep, and let's just talk about stress and what stress is doing to the neuroinflammation in our brain.
It's in short, it's worsening the neuroinflammation because stress is driving inflammation in the gut. The gut and brain are connected.
Mhm.
We know that our emotions affect the trillions of microbes. So
Mhm.
I like to think of them as their own little community down there. And
Yes.
when we are stressed, we have a tough day at work, an argument with a spouse, some sort of crisis. Our microbes start to respond within about 2 hours. Now, you may
Right.
not immediately see the effect, but the sort of downstream of that is it's impacting our stress. The gut and brain are connected, so stress in your gut will
Mhm.
impact your overall feeling of stress,
Mhm.
but is also driving that inflammation and neuroinflammation.
Mhm.
So, think about it as this cycle. And ways that you can impact that are, a mindfulness practice, a meditation that appeals to you. Breath work is one of the most powerful things that people ignore to, whether it's box breathing or learning something on a YouTube video from someone teaching you a breathwork exercise. Research has shown, in fact, a study that was looking at pranayama or breathwork yoga and looking at heart disease found that depression and anxiety were improved with breathwork yoga.
Yeah.
And that all you
And
need to do is learn a
it makes
breathwork
sense.
exercise.
It makes total sense because when you're actually breathing properly, you can't be stressed. Physiologically, you can't be stressed in the body. You might have stress, but your body isn't reacting. Like you're not increasing those stress hormones when you're
That's so
breathing
true.
properly, right? Isn't
It's
that
almost it's almost like it's, it's a strong word, but it's almost like forced relaxation, because by focusing on your breath, you are resetting your mind.
right?
You are moving your body differently. And often, if I'm in a tough situation, I will often just stop and take a deep breath.
Mhm.
And I try to convey that, to my patients, and some of them follow and some of them don't. But it's a very powerful thing because it's really resetting your system. And it's super helpful.
Absolutely. And I always say that to clients too. I say, I'm not necessarily able to take away, that stress from work or that stress from
Mhm.
whatever's going on in your life, but I can help you. And so everybody listening here, we can help you. You can, even if you have these, you might be saying to yourself, oh, I have this stress and this stress and that stress. Yeah,
Mhm.
we might not take that away right now, but you can actually, for every person listening right now, you could just decide, like you just said, to stop, to breathe properly. And that will actually be helping the way your body is reacting to the stress. So even though those
Right.
stressors might not go away, what's actually happening physiologically in your body can be improved, and that will help your overall health. And so those things are so important. And then generally, it does also help you emotionally handle how it's going on,
Mhm.
because when you do take
Mhm.
that breath and you do feel better and you are able to deal with those stresses better. So I think it helps on many levels. And then the other thing, when you just mentioned, like when you're in a tough situation, you take the moment to slow down. It's also really important too, because very often people are stressed and then they rush to go have a meal and they're eating and they don't take that moment to slow down. And when you don't slow down, when you don't take a breath, when you don't relax your nervous system, your digestion is going to be off. Like you just said, there is that gut brain connection. And when you're eating in a stressed state, you're not digesting your food properly. So it's really important, especially if you are very stressed, to make sure that you take that moment to calm yourself down, to relax, to do some breath work before you eat so that you digest food better.
But I couldn't agree with you more. These are, again, not prescriptions. These are things that any one of us can do. This by having almost a
Absolutely.
lifestyle prescription to do these things
Mhm.
and really feel more empowered over our brain health and our cognitive health.
Absolutely. So I have a couple more specific questions to Alzheimer's right now. So one, we talked a little bit at the beginning about Alzheimer's, and well, we talked about being in the stage of life where you might be going through perimenopause,
Yes.
menopause.
Hmm.
So as we go through this period of life and women lose estrogen lowers. We know that most of your estrogen receptors are in your brain. Can you talk a little bit about Alzheimer's as it relates the relationship to menopause and what we can do to manage that?
I think that, a lot of times when women are speaking to their doctors about menopausal symptoms, they get, to be honest, they get treated as though they're making it up, or they get told to take an antidepressant medication. And
Mhm.
it's important to understand that the gut microbes are involved in things like not only sleep and circadian rhythm, mental well being, they're also involved with vitamin and hormone production. So, one of the ways I like people to think about this phase is that how they eat can impact it. Anti inflammatory foods, stepping back from ultra processed foods, even more so, because sometimes when not only are women in the silent generation, they are super stressed and then they develop menopausal symptoms.
Mhm.
What's the first thing they reach for is that box of candy or chocolates because it's soothing, right? It has that initial soothing effect. We know that those simple carbs have that initial effect, but the long-term impact is negative for neurons in the brain. So a simple thing to do is to recheck how you're eating and what you're eating, to do all of the lifestyle factors we've mentioned already, to really seek a clinician or physician and or nutritionist that can help guide you and really gets that there are real impacts of menopause. There's now a growing movement around menopause and perimenopause brought forward by some wonderful female doctors who are in this space. And I'm going to encourage people to think about, looking at their books, looking at the tips that they're giving, because all of this does impact your brain health. So, we want to think about lifestyle and diet, first and foremost.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship between obesity, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's. We know that the Alzheimer's has been coined, the term has been coined, type 3 diabetes. And we know that studies suggest that neurodegeneration that occurs with Alzheimer's is associated with the abnormalities of insulin growth factor 1 and 2. And can you just discuss sort of what's going on there and how, because I think people, again, have heard of that, but they don't necessarily know the full connection. But I also think it's another motivating factor for people to reduce things like highly processed foods as well as sugar.
Correct. So a simple way to break this down for people and how I like to explain to my patients is realize that when we are eating poorly, our glucose is impacted. Glucose is directly related to our metabolism. And the more that we are eating poorly, we're eating a standard American diet, the more that we are driving our bodies and our cells, actually on a cellular level, our mitochondria, our cellular system, into not only overdrive, but potentially towards insulin resistance. We know that about 88% of Americans have some form of poor metabolic health. They don't necessarily have metabolic syndrome, but they have something that's off. And a large component, besides stress and lifestyle and other factors, is actually our diet. So these things can be impacted. So think about it this way. Anytime, this is why people, even if they don't have prediabetes or diabetes, they are using continuous glucose monitoring. They're using they might, if their physicians can't prescribe it for them, they are even buying it or buying a subscription to a service where they can check the impact of a certain food on their blood sugar. And that becomes important in making this connection for ourselves, because here's a great example.
Do you like the CGMs? Do you like people to use CGMs even if they don't have diabetes or they're not diabetic?
I think that it's an option to help. It depends on the person. It depends on their level of motivation. It depends if they have access and they can get it, because they can be expensive if they're not under prescription. But it is a way to guide. And let me use an example. I'm not saying everyone has to do this, but usually oatmeal is considered a healthy food. And, pure steel cut oats prepared in the right way, definitely having it as an option is completely fine. But the more processed, the more sugars and the more unhealthy ingredients, it can unfortunately, lead to a rise in glucose when you use a CGM. And that was one of the things I discovered with a few of my patients. Even though we were suggesting eat these whole grains, eat them in a healthy way, it was spiking their blood sugar. So it's not that oats on their own are unhealthy. It's just that it gives us information that we can tweak.
I agree. It gives us information, but I also think that's why if you are going to use a CGM, you should be working with a professional, because you might see, oh, I'm eating oatmeal, my blood sugar spiked, but it's not necessarily, you might still enjoy the oatmeal. You might be reaping, you're reaping benefits from, there are a lot of important nutrients in oatmeal. And if you really enjoy them, they could be part of a healthy breakfast, but it's then having someone help educate you. Well, why don't you try a small portion of the oatmeal, take away the brown sugar and add some nuts to it and maybe a hard boiled egg on the side. All of a sudden it's a much more balanced meal and the person's still enjoying the oatmeal. So I always think with CGMs, I think they're information. And like you said, if you have access, it can be beneficial. It's not a must, but it can be information that can be powerful for people, even to try just for a couple of weeks to learn a little bit about what's working.
And always to work with a clinician. To your point, you see this spike and you think, oh, I can never eat that again. It's not that. It's tweaking the source, the content, even that particular meal, adding a protein,
Mm-hmm.
offsetting some of the carb load, all of that becomes important. Adding fiber to that meal. So I think it's information, and it's for the individual who is highly motivated,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little concerned,
Absolutely.
maybe has a family history, and can work with a clinician to guide them.
So we've talked a lot about things we can do to prevent Alzheimer's. We talked a lot, also about the specific foods, lifestyle factors, and we talked about really what's going on in the
Yeah.
brain when we have Alzheimer's. But can we talk about what's the future here? I mean, what because
Yeah.
I know right now there's no way to reverse it, correct?
hmm
So
there isn't an immediate way
there's
right now, but there's ongoing research, and we hope that we'll know more. Um, I
right,
think I think I think what's hopeful is that we are collecting more information, and that's why I mentioned some of these cognitive tests that people can do that
right,
will send so that you can add to the show notes, because these are just free online resources that people can try, that is more providing information and resources. But I think I'm very hopeful about things like the the food solutions to manipulate in a positive way the
hmm
microbiome. So,
hmm
people talk about symbiotics or psychobiotics, and that's
right,
really through food sources. I also am encouraged that the research is ongoing, and we might know more. But I think I also want to loop back to what I said at the beginning. The everyday person can just start to work on lifestyle factors
hmm
while understanding their family history, while knowing that they may get tested, or they may be experiencing symptoms and want to go and get that baseline test from their doctor, or go to a reliable online source that can help them get tested. This, I think the less times that we are stressing our mind and our body, the better it is going to be for our overall
right,
mental well-being.
right,
And I think
absolutely,
that when we get caught in the loop of being, and I know this because I've had different wars that go on at different times. We get into like almost a stress loop. So I do
Mhm.
think having positive outlook, being hopeful about the future, thinking about the solutions that are out there, following the research, and having someone interpret that for you. Going to reliable online resources, like your school, like your clinicians, Keri, that can actually help to guide people. These things are important. I think just getting information on TikTok from the everyday
Right,
influencer may not be that helpful. And
right,
sometimes some of those influencers are trained in a certain profession, but getting well sourced, well vetted information that can help guide you,
right.
and not just scare you or stress you.
Right. And I think it's hopeful what you're saying too, because you're saying really don't stress too much about this, but
Yeah.
use the things that you have access to that everyone really has access to, like using stress management tools, working on that sleep, getting in those healthy foods,
Mhm.
focus on all of these ways that we can prevent not just Alzheimer's, but other forms of dementia
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
future. At the same time, don't stress about it, but check in, use some of these resources online, maybe to check in, maybe go to your doctor for screening if you're
Mhm.
really worried, but don't overly stress about it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
again, use these things that we all kind of have access to. Especially, I think people sometimes, like we were talking about breath work, I think sometimes people don't even realize how
Or exercise. We didn't particularly stress exercise, but that's a huge part of
right.
lifestyle as well.
Oh, right. We
You
didn't
know,
talk
so,
right.
you know what I mean? Some people just, not only is it connected to improve brain health, but just if you're
Hmm
feeling stressed, if you're feeling that, get on the treadmill for 10 minutes, or
hmm
if that's what
Well,
the
right. There's
time you
many
have, do
benefits.
it for
There's
10
right.
minutes.
Right. There's
I'm
the
a big
reducing of stress, and then there's also the executive function benefits that come along with exercise.
and the release of endorphins, which actually make people
Right.
naturally feel better. So I often will say to same group of individuals in the sandwich generation, I talk about exercise snacks. I'm all
Mhm.
about food, but exercise snacks are doing bits of exercise when you
Yeah.
can. So you may not be able to work out a full hour with your trainer because you've got to take care of your family in the morning. Can you do a half hour at a different time of the day? Or can you just get on the treadmill a half hour in the morning before your family gets up, so that you've gotten in at least 30 minutes on the treadmill. And then maybe in the evening, you do another half hour, or you take a walk after dinner, or
Mhm.
you lift some weights, so you do something. Exercise snacks are all about doing small amounts when you can fit it in. And that way you're not worried about carving out a whole hour at one time. Now, I'm not looking at all the different scientific factors and how the science of exercise works. I'm just saying to get my patients moving,
Right.
to get them away from that complacency of let me sit and scroll what's on television. These are
Right.
ways to build in things that help as a lifestyle factor too.
And I think that's also motivating to know for people that you can just get it in at little bits of time. And that's one reason I like people to track steps, because yes, we should be
Yes.
exercising, especially women should be weight training. And there's yoga and Pilates and things like that are also good for de-stressing, and there's multiple benefits to different forms of exercise. However, I always say that just movement throughout the day is also
Mm.
super important for your overall longevity. And I think we always talk about the 10,000 steps, and I love personally to use that as my goal. In
Yeah.
addition to whatever
Yeah.
exercise I'm doing, I try to personally,
Right.
I just try to always make sure I get in 10,000 steps also. And it could literally be running to the store. It could be,
Yes.
walking around a
Yes.
mall. But I like to just keep track of that
That's
as sort
right.
of like bonus movement for the day.
You,
But what
right.
I do tell people, I do think though, it's actually research, I believe, has shown that it's I think it's 7 to 8,000 steps a day. You do reap the longevity benefits. So, and that's not to say that you shouldn't go for the 10 or go for more or do your other
Right.
exercise, but I think it is still motivating for people to know that there are
Right.
benefits, even if it's not that
Yeah.
10,000, and you are reaping most of those longevity benefits again with just that 7 to 8,000. So again, just for some people that think, oh, I can't get that in, that's difficult, just aim for that then, and you're gonna reap some of those benefits.
You're
So
gonna hit your goal.
I want to take a moment to tell you about our podcast sponsor, which I'm a super fan of. In today's fast-paced go, go, go world, it's so easy to get overwhelmed and lose focus, especially when you're trying to accomplish critical tasks that require a sharp mind. If you're looking for a way to support your brain health and stay on top of your game, if you know me at all, you know I'm always looking to do that. Well, then you want to know about cognizant citicoline. This nutrient helps support brain function, and it plays a vital role in nourishing and protecting brain cells. Cognizant citicoline can help support focus, memory, and attention, promote cognitive performance, and support overall brain health. It's also known for its ability to support brain energy and is backed by numerous studies that show its effectiveness. Whether you're a student, a busy professional, a multitasking parent, or anyone looking to optimize mental clarity and sharpness, adding cognizant citicoline to your daily routine can help you achieve those goals and support your brain for the future. It can be found in many different products, including chewables, gummies, beverages, and even cold brew coffee. Visit cognizant.com for exactly where to find this ingredient, and don't forget to look for Cognizant on the label. I'm glad also that you mentioned again, there isn't a cure right now, but you're hopeful that, there's a lot of research going on. You're hopeful that we're going to have more information in hopefully the not so far off future. And you're connecting it to, you think the research is going to be done, or you think a cure, or, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're hopeful for research coming down the pipeline,
Yeah.
as it relates to the microbiome and brain health. Is that
I'm
accurate?
I'm most excited about the microbiome and brain health, but there are several resources and things people should know. For example, the Women's Alzheimer's Movement (WAM) is doing a lot of research and has partnered up with certain hospitals and are funding research for certain Alzheimer's researchers that are very focused on finding a cure. So they're also an organization led by Maria Shriver and her team that
Mhm.
actually offers resources for people. So go to their website, check out what they're doing. And they also have articles that you can read. Say you need to, or you're worried about something, you want to check a fact. You may not know how to interpret the full research article, but you can take it to your doctor. You can discuss it with the clinician that you're working with. I think that the more information and education people have, the more demystified the scary part of Alzheimer's and cognitive decline can be. And I think it also makes people feel more empowered. So I would also suggest that as a resource.
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you. And I'm to just end here, so grateful for your time. To wrap things up, I'll tell everyone we'll put that resource in the show notes, as well as the links to the other information that you mentioned, Shield, as well as we'll put in your bogos, as well as you also said there was also another link that you gave at the beginning that
foodforthebrain.org.
Yes,
Just a survey you can do.
Yep, we'll put that in as well. So we'll have all those resources for you, for everyone listening. And last question for you, Uma. How do you live your most nutritious life on a daily basis? Or what do you do to ignite your nutritious life on a daily basis?
I do a few things that are sort of very basic, but I do them on a regular basis, and consistency is key. I always get up and drink water. I find myself dehydrated in the morning. I have recently started to incorporate more sources of healthy plant-based protein for myself. I'm vegetarian and have been since whenever, and I cook anything, as you know. But I've learned to actually create a healthy granola, and which I've made at home, and recipes on my books.
I was going to say, we want that recipe.
Exactly, with cottage cheese, because what I find is sometimes I don't get up that hungry. I love my water. I want a cup of coffee. I don't feel that hungry, but I've actually taught myself that when I have a small but healthy breakfast, it has led to a more nutritious life, because then I'm more paced about my meals.
Yes.
I'm not looking for a snack. And I do have a healthy snack when I want to, but if I can get through my Zoom calls and stuff and get to lunchtime, I'm just more comfortable. Whereas when I was in my book launch mode, I was skipping breakfast, thinking, well, let me try this sort of version of my intermittent fasting. It's all about that body intelligence. And I realized for me, it was more stressful. So I have
absolutely, for me too.
Fasting, but so it's really an adjustment on my part, but it has worked a lot better.
Oh, I love that. Well, I'm a breakfast girl, so you know that about me. So I'm all for that. So I love that, the hydration in the morning and that breakfast with protein. And I love that you mentioned cottage cheese, one of my favorite ways to get in some protein too. So love all of that. We are so grateful for your time today. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible insight. And again, I'll put all these links in the show notes, and Dr. Naidoo and I also have a course together. I will also put that in the show notes. So as always, so amazing chatting with you. Thank you so much.